Hey everybody, it's Pastor James, and as always, I'm glad to be able to put up on the internet a video challenge from the Scripture. And I wanted to be able to share an extension of our last Sunday sermon together, our Bible study in James chapter 1. And the challenge that came from James chapter 1 was, do not miss the proper perspective. And it came from James chapter 1 when we considered the proper perspective we ought to have in times of trial. And we considered back in James chapter 1 that whatever situation we find ourselves in this life, our perspective is to rejoice or glory in that we have the opportunity to grow through the trials and to be able to learn from them. And again, that entailed two different individuals, two different persons, two different positions they found themselves in at the end of trial, but the perspective they ought to have had was the same. They needed to glory or rejoice. And I'm turning there real quick. James chapter 1. It's in verses 9 and 10 and 9, 10, and 11. And whatever version you might be reading from, I'm going to read it from the NASB. It says, "But let the brother of humble circumstances glory in his high position, and the rich man glory in his humiliation. Because like flowering grass he will pass away. For the sun rises with a scorching wind and withers the grass, and its flower falls off, and the beauty of its appearance is destroyed. So too the rich man in the midst of his pursuits will fade away." And when you look at that illustration, again, this is why we're considering it on Wednesday. The natural element, the natural illustration is vegetation, grass specifically, and the flowers of grass. And that's the thing, we don't really see much with grass. We see weeds within our grass, like dandelions and such like that. But consider the illustration for what it is. The perspective that even someone who is a rich man should be is to glory in his low position, or another word is humiliation. Why is that? Well, trials have a tendency to test the place that we put our security in. Trials have a tendency to indicate to us not necessarily what we're deficient in, but what we feel secure in. And when you consider the illustration, James is trying to get us to understand a principle that you can apply today, and that is this: check your pursuits. Check your pursuits. Because the principle here is that the rich man may be rich because he has monetary wealth, but he's also rich in that he has an attitude of pursuing wealth. We know that because at the end of the illustration in verse 11, it said, "So also shall the rich man fade away," or again, you might have a different "pass away in his pursuits." So the rich man is not just rich because he has, but because that's what he strives for. That's what he pursues. That's what he works hard to attain. Further riches. Doesn't matter how much he has, his heart attitude, apart from where the Lord wants to take him, is to pursue wealth and find security in it. And as I said, this illustration is that of the sun scorching the earth, in the sense of the flower of the field, the grass. And that's something that we all know about. It's summertime. It's overcast somewhat today. There's a little bit of sun. But one of the most brutal things that happens to the vegetation that also gives life to it in other ways is the sun. And the sun holds just tremendous weight upon even our own skin and how we take care of ourselves out in the outdoors. But the sun is going to shine, and the grass is going to receive the sunlight, but there's a point when the grass will eventually die out, fade away, will lose his flour, will lose it. And so that's the same illustration we have with pursuits of life. The rich man who has pursues more. And so the question is, what are you pursuing with your own life? Are your pursuits that which God is honored by? Because it most certainly is not just the rich man who pursues wealth and lusts after further gain. There are many who lust and strive and pursue after attaining for themselves some sort of security in this life, but just like the grass of the field, it's going to fade away. It's not guaranteed. If you looked at a specific passage I'm going to give you, it's Mark 8:36. There's a question. It says, "What shall it profit a man if he gain the whole world, yet lose his own soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul?" So your pursuits define who you are. The rich man in James chapter 1 is pursuing after further wealth. And it takes a growth in godliness to realize that that striving and that pursuing is not going to bring lasting security. Only Christ alone can do that. And I want to leave you with one more passage. It's out of a passage we studied several weeks back, and it's in Matthew chapter 6. Matthew 6, and you're probably already quoting it in your head. Matthew 6. And it's verse 19. Excuse me, it took me a second. Verse 19. "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroy and where thieves do not break in or steal." And here's the important verse, verse 21. "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." And so I know that there's a lot that we've just mentioned in the past 7 minutes, but my challenge is this for you today, and this is my challenge for myself. Check your pursuits. Determine what it is you're striving for. And if you're seeking after what the rich man in his heart would strive after, surrender that back to God and lay up for yourselves treasures on earth. Treasures in heaven. And that's it. That's what I wanted to share with you today. Look back at that passage. I barely touched on it, but feel free to study that passage again. Check your pursuits today. Have a blessed one. Bye-bye.